Hi friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and today I am specifically here to celebrate the Kickstarter campaign by Artisan Tarot for their Jean Noblet Tarot of Marseille, which is set loose today, November 2nd, 2021. I have here two other Noblet decks that I have already. One by Peterson, which is more or less a facsimile deck. I believe this is the first edition, and with this edition they included restoration cards or correction cards for a few of the cards. But I have here the way that the deck originally appeared. The second deck that I have for comparison is the Flornoy or Flornoy, where it's not obviously a facsimile deck, but they've, made some clarification decisions, maybe made some color changes. And it's a wonderful deck. I'm not poo-pooing either of these decks, but I am celebrating this one. Now, why do I like this one? Well, unlike most historic tarot decks, this one is made to be used, The folks over at Artisan who have already released the Convert Tarot, for those of you who have backed it, you should have already received your, your new decks. This one was a preview deck, but I did receive the final deck the other day in the mail. Unlike the other decks, the Artisan deck has that fine linen finish that just makes the cards a dream to shuffle. And I won't shuffle now because I have them all in order. And unlike the Flornoy and the Peterson, respectively, the Flornoy and the Peterson, the Artisan group decided to put a minimal rounded edge, so it's not in your face round, but it's just enough to make the cards a delight in your hand. So the packaging, as you can see too, it's a bit smaller, vertical, width-wise, right? It might be neck and yes, it's neck and neck with the Peterson, but it is less chunky than the Flornoy by a considerable margin. If we look at least maybe a dozen cards even. And also, we all know and love the Noblet for its smaller petite size, but this deck is even smaller and more petite than either the Richardson or the Flornoy. So it's a bridge size, which makes it very nice for travel, throwing it in your handbag. It's not like carrying a brick of cards, right? It's not like carrying the weight of a brick in your handbag, which, or in your pocket, for you fellas who might put them in your pocket or whatever. But for us women who tend to put them in our handbags, it's a lightweight deck, and it's not the weight of a regular full-size deck. So having said all that, let's take a look at the deck and compare it with the others. Now, just because a deck is a facsimile deck, and I think facsimile decks are very valuable because we get to see a glimpse into the past, and there's a certain amount of reverence for a deck that survived, to the present day from, 500, 400 years ago, right? But just because the way we see it now doesn't necessarily mean it's the way it was printed. And I think, that's a point that Flornoy, bore out when he envisioned the deck to maybe be more in keeping with, how it might have looked when it was originally published. He also may have made, and I think tarot publishers do this, make changes, color changes, or they have to make executive decisions because maybe the truth of how it might have looked is lost. And I think that the folks over at Artisan have done that pretty well. I do know for a fact that they, for the backers now, before it goes into the final printing, the final product for the backers, that they have toned down the orange, or the salmon, as they called it, because it is a bit, it is a bit in your face and a little overpowering. So I know they've made that tweak, but you can see that in the facsimile copy, it really is salmon, as opposed to Flornoy making it more Caucasian flesh. We see here also that Artisan group decided to put stockings on both legs and to show that the creature, the cat or dog, has attacked and has pulled down the leggings or the stockings. Whereas in both the Peterson and the Flornoy, we only see a fraction of the stocking. But it does make sense that, he was wearing hose or of some type. Now with the Peterson, this is the way the facsimile appearance of the fingers being missing. And Flornoy kept that. And the Artisan group decided to fill in the hand and to extend the wand. So they made the decision to believe that, this is not the way it appeared. And so they made that decision. And they also made one or two tweaks or changes to the coloring of the garment. I think with the female pope, what we see with the Artisan is the decision to make the garment of the high priestess or la papesse less confusing, less abstract. So they've made the decision to make the garment more cohesive. This is a very small thing, but I notice that the line in either the chair back or the wings or whatever those are supposed to be, they went differently with that, which is sort of random. But again, you see where they shine is in simplifying the garment so that all this abstraction of the Patterson, which is, am I saying it wrong? How many times have I said this? Of the Peterson, excuse me. Yeah, the abstraction of the facsimile deck in the Peterson, which the Flornoy kind of continued. The Artisan group really has simplified it. So we're not really looking at too many abstractions. There are a few, as in the wings or the chair back, and this thing, which if you've read J.M. David's reading the Marseille Tarot book, goes into what this is in his chapter on the Empress. And we can see, how the eagle has faded considerably, and it more than likely would have been much, much brighter. So, these changes, I think, do credit to the deck. And they've retained her expression. I think they've done something about making the mouth less like that and more in keeping with how it is. I think, before they send it out to the backers, I think they've made some of these tweaks. the Emperor. And again, simplifying the dress. Now in the facsimile, clearly the leggings are two different colors as they are retained in the Flornoy. But Artisan Group decided to make the leggings the same color. Now the shield, they got, I like how they handled this. These are thumb holes for the shields, right? So they would have been thumb holes. So they wouldn't have been black. They'd have been negative shapes cut into the shield. And you can see how when they, earlier woodblock prints were copying other decks, maybe they didn't know what those things were, so they filled them in because they just didn't know what they were. But here, they are truly negative shapes, and you see the background through those holes. So I think it's called a bioche, something like that. Okay. The Pope. And now with the Artisan. Again, great clarification in what we're looking at. Sometimes in the TDM style decks, we lose, the understanding that these are two people, probably pilgrims by virtue of their hat, this one's hat, and the tonsure hair, right? They get so abstract that you forget, you don't even know what you're looking at. Now, Flornoy really did clear that up to a great degree. And here too, they've decided to make the space between them red. So they've extended the cloak color onto the lap here. Here we have the Lover. And the most notable difference that we see with the Artisan is that this area with Cupid, they'd made the decision to color that in, whereas it's really more of an outlined area in the other two cards. I do know, as I mentioned, that they've reduced the salmon color, or they lightened that up so it's not as salmony. when we finally get our final decks, it won't be quite as bright. And the clothing, of course, makes more sense. I've spoke to William a number of times on during the time that they were he and Kristen were doing this deck, and I know for a fact that they were not looking at the Flornoy. They were looking at the facsimile deck, not necessarily Peterson's, but the one at the National Library. I think it's the library. Yeah, the National Library of France. I know they were looking at that original. So they were not making their decisions based on, what Flornoy did. They were really looking at the original. So they made, again, the decision to not match the skirt portion with the sleeves that the other two decks did, but to make the whole bottom red and gray. I think that's a gray blue. I think that's what they called it, but it does translate to gray. And I think they've tweaked that color now before sending it to the final printer. They've also changed the color they made a decision to change, you know, the bodice. Now, one thing you'll notice, and I pointed out to them, is that with the Noblet of both the, the facsimile deck and the one done by Flornoy, they've made the interior of the cloak yellow or orange to show that there's, like, I think, light from the lantern. I mean, the point of the card, the lantern is a focal point of the card, right? And with this, they don't have that. However, they listened to my recommendation that they do that, since the lantern is an integral part of the hermit, and they did. So when we get our final decks, it will reflect the yellow or the orange, a yellow color, to show that it is recognizing the light from the lantern. Now, not all TDMs show the light from the lantern, inside the cloak, but the Noblet does, and I think it was a constructive point to make with them, and they ultimately agree. But even if they didn't, it still, makes sense, fabric wise, and you can understand the clothing. But I kind of appreciate that they are now making this area yellow. Again, they've made the decision to make the leggings the same color. And they've also gotten rid of the negative space between the legs, or the cod piece, or whatever that is, showing through. I always thought it was probably a negative space between the legs. So they got rid of that, and they made the leggings the same color. Now in the facsimile deck, the ground is white. I don't know if it was darker or, a shade of gray that has since deteriorated. But Flornoy made the decision to make the ground black. And so they did also with the Artisan. And like I said, I know that they were not comparing it to they were not looking at the Flornoy. They were looking directly at the facsimile, or the actual deck from the museum when they made their decisions. So it's interesting that they decided to go with the black ground. Again, they chose to make the garment simplified with one color. And rather than the yellow at the bottom, they made it the salmon. Oh, I never showed the back, so let's look at the backs too, because if I don't show it now, I'll forget. All 3 decks honor the pattern on the back. Having a hard time picking this up. The one thing that Flornoy did that the other 2 decks did not do is that the Flornoy has a beige background or a yellowed background. I guess to maybe give it an antique look. Although it's interesting because then they made it crisp and clear, And I think the cards probably would have been printed on white, but I don't know. I don't know enough about the card making process. But, the facsimile does look white. So in the facsimile deck, in the Peterson deck, we have like a gradation, darker, ironically, on the sun side, or, the burst of light, you would think it would be lighter on this side and darker on the other side, But this is more of a gradation of color. And the Flornoy, they made it a solid color, as they did with the Artisan deck. And as I mentioned, this will be toned down. This bright orange body will be toned down. Interestingly, though, none of the bodies match, none of the skin coloring of the bodies match the faces. And again, the Artisan group, makes the background, the busyness, a little easier to understand. Just beautiful, really. The one thing they did not carry over would be the reflection of if this is an eclipse or the moonlight or whatever. It looks like there's an effort here to put some color reflection in these 2 decks, and this one doesn't. I don't know if they've changed that or left it. I don't think it has any bearing on how one might interpret the card, but it is a detail they left out. I think the sword suit is just outstanding with the Artisan I mean, it's crisp and clean. And they made a few executive decisions here. With this suit. I think you'll see it as we progress. That's just so crisp, beautiful. Now you see what I mean. In the facsimile of Peterson, they have like yellow in there, which the Flornoy retained. But Artisan decided not to do that and just presented them, you know, without the yellow. And we see this as the suit progresses. And of course, that is a decision that makes it infinitely easier, you know, to understand what's happening, right? TDM cards can get a little confusing in understanding what's going on, even with something as simple as the Suit of Swords, which is maybe why, you know, there were so many variations, you know, when people were copying from woodblock prints. They might not always have understood what they were copying. Now, of course, the cards from the Suit of Swords had to be recreated. There were missing ones. There were some that were missing. And so all three of these publishers had to make executive decisions about how they would look. I think from the 6 to the 10, I think, were the original cards that were missing from the Suit of Swords. I could be wrong, but I think it's 6 to 10. Again, they made the pant colors the same color as opposed to how it appears in the original. Again, easier to understand what we're looking at, I think. I think the Suit of Batons is also very beautiful. They did a nice job. Whereas the Flornoy deck chose, you know, more of a blue, a steely blue. The Artisan group, even though I think it's called a blue. It really looks more like gray. And I think they've lightened this up also for the final deck before it goes out to the printer for the final printing. So for those of you who think you've, seen enough, I will continue on. I may say other things that might be of interest, but primarily I'm mostly just going through the decks one by, the suits one by one at this stage. So I just wanted to give you fair warning. Now here, notice that there is some, it's solid, right? It's solid with the red peeking through. And here, Flornoy chose to make it solid as well. But here again, like with the swords, there's no confusion. They just, here are the batons. Without this, confusion in the center. We see that again. And here in the facsimile, there's like a random dot. It's not even, it's just in the middle of the crisscrossing here. And the artisan group handled it differently than either. I think this, I think the 6 of batons did exist. Let me see. Yeah. This is the way it appears in the facsimile. So they made an executive decision to change the way the crisscrossing of the batons appears. And I suspect they did it based on what they imagined it was supposed to look like. Maybe not actually the way it really did. But I can't say I dislike it. Beautiful. Okay, the cards are getting kind of slippery and slidey, so I'm going to kind of put these aside and start some new center piles. Nice. Again, clarification on what we're looking at in the clothing in particular. Although both of these are rendered not too confusingly. But the Artisan just makes it look a little more finished. Okay. All three of these are very similar. And now we're down to the last two suits. I don't think there was much difference between the cups and the coins as there has been with the batons and the swords. I think there's minor tweaks, like in correcting the number. Now, I think in the facsimile, this doesn't show it, but in the facsimile, and if I pulled it from the box, I'd see it. I think it was actually a misprint on the original. It's like IV rather than VI, as the Flornoy retained the original error. But the Artisan group corrected it. And we see that again here in the 8 of Cups. Peterson corrected it, Flornoy left it, and Artisan corrected it also. So if you're hanging out with me this long, you really are a geek. So welcome to the Geek Club. You know, I think it's awesome if you're a geek. I'm a geek too. Just fascinates me, you know, because in a way, you know, this is history happening again, right? This is, in 100 years, you know, the Artisan deck will be, you know, another version of the Noblet that was created over the years. You know, it's keeping history alive, tarot history alive. And, you know, at some point, you know, in the future, they may discuss, look what happened, you know, look what they did, look how they changed it, you know, what were they basing it on or whatever. And it just goes to show that this is the exact same thought process we have when we look at the earlier decks and wonder why, you know, TDM isn't always copied in the same way, and why sometimes things get muddled and confused because they don't always know what we're looking at. You know, and again, you know, with this version, you can see clarity in understanding the clothing and the drapery, right, of the fabric. There are still unknowable things like this thing and this thing, right? And they're retained in all three decks. But it's nice to see some clarification in the clothing. Okay, we're getting down to the kings and then the last suit. I love the pattern on the floor of the King of Cups. I love it. Oh, my apologies. I have a tripod in front of me, so I am sorry about that. Okay, now we're down to the last suit, the suit of coins. I usually present that last. And as I said, there's not a whole lot of difference. Oh, I got it upside down here. Well, I don't know which way was the right way or which way is the upside down way, but I think I just wanted to show them in the same direction. So not much different. Between the three. I just love the way the Artisan deck feels. I mean, I'm handling both of these decks, you know, and the cardstock with the Flornoy is very thick. I overhand shuffle. I don't riffle shuffle these. I think with the Peterson, you could probably riffle shuffle. But, you know, this deck is just made to riffle shuffle. The Artisan deck is just made for that. It just feels really good in the hand. You can see, as I mentioned a couple times, it's even smaller than these other two decks. So it's even more petite. And if we consider that the game of tarot is a precursor to our game of bridge, it kind of is interesting and satisfactory, actually, that this now is a bridge size. You know, this is the bridge size stock, right? So it's kind of interesting. Now, I may have these in reverse. I don't know if they were really more correctly this way. But all three of them were the other way. Oh yeah, and I have coins that match this, and I can see it very clearly here. I had gone on this little thing to buy coins to match the tarot decks, the historic tarot decks that I have, and one of the coins that I found matched the Noblet. I mean, it's really hard to see because it's not a, it's hard. I mean, I can see it, but the coin itself is like from this, you know, obviously from this 1600s. So it's like really tiny and worn. And all about you can see is the cross and some kind of floral. But it's interesting for me. I like connecting with history, you know, because I'm a geek. I notice in the coin cards they don't have the corresponding number on the other side. And we're down to the quartz. Again, greatly clarifying the clothing. There's still a little bit of confusion, but I think the effort was made to clarify the fabric folds. And the last card. The one thing you'll notice, like they did in the Conver, the artisan group added the legs of the chair that are lost here. And some clarification in the fabric of the king's clothing. So there you have it. The artisan group's Kickstarter campaign begins today, November 2nd, 2021. They have some great incentives, including socks and a pouch to carry this in to protect it so that you're not throwing it loosely into your handbag or pocket. Personally, I bought the deck, whose price point is perfect at $35, and I bought 2 pairs of socks. I didn't buy the pouch because I don't really need the pouch, but I couldn't resist the socks. So please, give them your patronage. I think they're a wonderful group of people, William and Kristen, and they make quality decks, and I love quality decks. Right? I'm about the tarot. I'm about the quality of the cards. If I thought they weren't doing good work, I would never buy them in the first place, nor would I endorse them. And I don't just take the free decks. They send me the they send me preview decks, but and I think that's very gracious of them. But I support them. I buy the decks. I go to Kickstarter and I buy the decks in support of them, and I wouldn't do that if I didn't believe in them. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and that you do go check out their Kickstarter. And until next time, friends, peace and stay well.